Durst was born in New York City in 1943 with a metaphorical silver spoon in his mouth. His father was a wealthy businessman owning a real estate company called the Durst Organization, which owns hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate. While the Durst family lived a life of luxury, they also had serious issues. When Robert was just 7 years old, his mother committed suicide. As a young boy, Robert got into frequent fights with his brother. His father sent him to get a psychological evaluation, which found he had symptoms of schizophrenia. After graduating college, he started working for the family business. As the oldest son, it was expected Robert would take over as CEO once his father retires. Despite being the heir to the company, Robert's behavior was unbecoming and in some cases outright bizarre. He had a habit of urinating in trash cans at the office. When his dad found out about this, he appointed his younger son, Douglas, to be the new CEO instead of Robert. Robert was furious and sued his own family as well as the Durst Organization. The Durst family eventually agreed to pay Robert $65 million to relinquish any claim he had to the Durst Organization. With this payout, Robert was financially secure for the rest of his life, but he was isolated from his family and developed a deep hatred for them. In addition to his family drama, there were a number of suspicious deaths that happened around Robert throughout his life. The first one was his wife, Kathleen McCormack, whom he married in 1973. By the 1980s, Robert was seeing another woman and his marriage with Kathleen was falling apart. Kathleen wanted to get a divorce and asked Robert for a $250,000 divorce settlement. Robert made it clear that this was unacceptable to him. In January of 1982, Kathleen was admitted to a New York hospital for treatment of bruises on her face. She told a friend the bruises were from Robert, but she declined to press charges. 3 weeks later, Kathleen failed to show up to a pub where she planned to meet a friend. A few days later, Robert Durst called the police to report his wife missing. The couple owned a house in South Salem, a small town outside of New York City, as well as an apartment in New York City itself. Robert told police that he and Kathleen were staying at their South Salem house. On January 31st, he took her to a train station where she was heading back to their apartment in New York City. A doorman at the New York City apartment claimed to have seen Kathleen the next day, on February 1st. If she was still alive on February 1st, this would potentially give Robert an alibi, as he was not in New York City at the time of her disappearance. However, the doorman later revealed that he only saw Kathleen from behind and was not certain it was actually her. It was later revealed that the doorman was not even scheduled to be working at the time he claimed to have seen Kathleen. Given the high profile of the Durst family in New York City, the disappearance of Robert's wife garnered significant media attention. Robert Durst was described by many as an awkward man, and he generally didn't like interacting with the public. So he enlisted his longtime friend, Susan Behrman, to act as his unofficial spokesperson, telling the media about Robert's supposed alibi. Kathleen McCormack's body was never found, and the case went cold for the next 20 years. In November of 2000, Robert Durst was made aware that the police had reopened the Kathleen McCormack case. Robert became extremely worried about this and decided to leave the state. He moved to the small town of Galveston, Texas, and started dressing like a woman to conceal his identity. A couple months later, in December of 2000, Robert drove to Los Angeles, where Susan Behrman lived. A few days later, the Beverly Hills Police received an anonymous letter with no return address. They opened it up and found a cryptic handwritten note. Written on the note was 1527 Benedict Canyon, and then the word cadaver. Cadaver is a technical term in the medical profession, meaning corpse. The note was suspicious enough that the police paid a visit to that address. As it turns out, that address belonged to Susan Behrman's home. When police entered, they saw Susan's dead body. The cause of death was a gunshot to the back of her head. It's important to remember that Susan Behrman helped Robert develop his alibi in relation to the Kathleen McCormack murder 18 years prior. With the police reopening the investigation, Robert wanted to silence any potential witnesses. Los Angeles police weren't able to connect these dots, and Berman's murder also turned into a cold case. After killing Berman, Robert Durst went back to Galveston, Texas, where he continued dressing as a woman to conceal his identity. 1 year later, in October of 2001, human body parts were found in the Galveston Bay. The body parts were identified as belonging to Morris Black, who was Durst's neighbor. Durst was arrested and charged with murder, but his defense team argued it was self-defense. Durst claimed Black had stolen his gun and was threatening him with it. A struggle between the two men ensued, and the gun accidentally discharged, shooting Black in the face and instantly killing him. Instead of calling the police, Durst proceeded to chop up Black's body with knives, a saw, and an axe. He then dumped the body in Galveston Bay. It does seem strange to dispose of a body in this manner after killing someone in self-defense. Durst's defense team explained that Robert suffered from Asperger's, which caused him to act strangely in this stressful situation. The jury bought the defense's story, and Durst was acquitted, although Durst did plead guilty to a lesser charge of evidence tampering for dismembering and attempting to dispose of Black's body. He was sentenced to 5 years behind bars. In 2006, Durst was released from prison. Over the following years, he moved around from state to state, and his actions grew increasingly bizarre. In one case, he was caught shoplifting a chicken sandwich at a convenience store in Pennsylvania. When he was arrested, he had more than $500 of cash in his pocket, making his motives for the shoplifting unclear. In a separate case, he was caught urinating in the candy aisle of a CVS drugstore in Houston. He paid fines for these crimes and moved on with his life. By the late 2000s, the three suspicious deaths, Kathleen McCormick, Susan Berman, and Morris Black, started to gain significant media attention. They had garnered so much attention that in 2010, Ryan Gosling starred in a movie called All Things Good, which was inspired by Durst's life story. Robert Durst watched the movie and was a big fan, so much so that he contacted the film's director and offered to help them make a documentary about his life. So they started filming. The documentary examined Robert Durst's life, including interviews with Durst himself, as well as family members and associates. It's unclear why Durst agreed to help create this documentary. Perhaps he wanted a chance to tell his side of the story and clear his name once and for all. The deaths of Kathleen McCormick and Susan Berman had both occurred more than 10 years ago by this point. They had long since become cold cases, and there was insufficient evidence to arrest Robert. This emboldened him with a sense of security. The documentary had 6 episodes. The first 4 episodes went as expected. The producers asked Robert about the suspicious nature of the deaths, and Robert categorically denied any involvement. But right before they started filming the 5th episode, the producers unexpectedly received a piece of smoking gun evidence from the unlikeliest of sources. After Susan Berman's death, her stepson inherited many of her possessions. One of these items was a handwritten letter sent by Robert Durst to Susan, dated 1999. The handwriting on this letter matched the anonymous letter sent to the Beverly Hills Police almost exactly. Even the misspelling of Beverly was the same. In the 5th episode, the producers confronted Durst with the 2 letters. Durst denied sending the anonymous letter to the police, but it was evident that they were almost certainly written by the same person. This revelation set Durst into a panic. He had set up this documentary on the premise that it would clear his name. Now he was confronted with these letters for which he had no explanation. Exasperated, he went to the bathroom to collect his thoughts in solitude. He failed to realize that he was still wearing his clip-on microphone and it was recording. In the bathroom, he murmured to himself 2 sentences that would seal his fate. He said, "What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course." The documentary was broadcasted on HBO for millions of people to see. At this point, Robert knew it was game over. He withdrew a few $100,000 worth of cash from his bank account and procured a fake ID. In March of 2015, the FBI found him at a hotel in New Orleans by tracking his cell phone. When they arrested him, they found a map of Cuba. he was planning to flee to the island nation as it had no extradition treaty with the United States. He was charged with the murder of Susan Behrman. At the time of his arrest, Durst was 72 years and suffered from a variety of health issues. The trial was delayed multiple times as he received medical treatment in prison. It was delayed again after members of his defense team were impacted by Hurricane Harvey in 2018. It was delayed again in 2020 due to the pandemic. On January 10, 2022, he died of a heart attack in his California prison cell before the jury could return a verdict.